Howdy YouTube, and welcome to this episode of the Gunman. So today we've got a bit of a run to get rid of. I don't get hangers this size very often at all, so I thought I would take this opportunity to show you guys how I handle one of these runs. So the very first thing you need to do is make sure it is properly dry. So as you see there, I've got my infrared curing lights, and I put them on for probably an hour or an hour and a half. I just walked off and jumped on another job. Now you probably noticed that I had the digital infrared thermometer gauge there, so it's worth keeping an eye on the paint temperatures. I've found that like the absolute top limit is, look, 110, and that is extreme. You really shouldn't even get it that hot, but you can, okay? So I actually got this quarter panel here to 110 degrees. I didn't quite expect that it was going to get that hot. I probably should have held it back a little bit, but at the end of the day, it got to 110 degrees. That's Celsius, which is equivalent to 230 degrees Fahrenheit for my American viewers. So yes, that's right up at the top end of what you can actually do with paint, like 2-pack paint. You really don't want to get it any hotter than that, especially if it's still fresh. So if you're baking 2-pack primer and you get it that hot, then you're just going to blister and bubble it. But this car here had already had a bake, so it was sort of most of the way towards being dry. But if you go and hit fresh paint, like that's just been applied with 110 degrees, it'll just start blistering and bubbling. But once you're happy that it is nice and dry, for starters, you want to cool it down after you do all the heating up. Let it cool right back down. Get the air blower if you're in a bit of a hurry, otherwise you can just walk away. And you really do need it to be cool, because if it's still hot, well, then it will actually stay a little bit fresh. So what can happen is, if you're not careful with the tungsten or the razor blade, you can actually lift the wet spots of paint out of the inside of the run. Before you do go and take to it with a razor blade or a tungsten, it's worth getting your fingernail, get that onto the run itself where it's built up nice and thick. And if your fingernail is able to press into it, like if it feels still a bit soft, then it probably needs a little bit more of a go with the infrared lights. So it's one of those things that, look, at the end of the day, you're still dealing with layers, and you just need to get the raised sections down without sanding or without touching too much of the surrounding areas, because the surrounding areas have the right amount of paint on there, yet the built up area obviously has too much. So if you just go and take to that with, say, a piece of 800 grit straight up without doing the shaving down, all you're going to do is hit the surrounding sections, and then you will end up cutting through. So that's why we shaved it down with the razor blade and the tungsten. So I must admit, some of the footage of the razor blading and the tungsten wasn't actually that good, because I must have had my head too close to the quarter panel there. So I do apologize. I did actually have to edit out quite a bit of the shaving down of the run, but I hope there was enough there for you guys to get the basic idea. So what we were doing was a combination of tungsten and razor blade. Now I will actually include a link to the tungsten, where I got my tungsten, in the description of this video, because whenever I do a video like this, I do get a few people asking, oh, what's that tungsten? Where can I get one? What are they all about? They're actually pretty reasonably priced. I think they're like around 90 Australian dollars, and they are a handy tool to have. I'd say a must for every spray painter. You can also use them to denib little bits of dust out of your paintwork with, but I'll go deeper into that kind of thing in a separate video. For here, we're just trying to get rid of that run. So after I was happy that I got most of the run out with the tungsten and the razor blade, I decided to move on to the sanding stage, which is what I'm doing now. So I started off with 800 grit, which may sound pretty coarse, but I find that if you go too fine, well, then it will just end up sort of going over like a speed hump. It won't actually shave it down nice and straight. The block I'm using is one of the 3M stick-it blocks. I've always loved these. I started my apprenticeship, I was taught to do denibs with those 3M stick-it blocks. So they're actually designed for the old school sticky backed sandpaper. So yeah, the really old sandpaper that you stuck, instead of being a Velcro backed sandpaper, they're designed to stick to these blocks here. But I've always used them for wet rubbing, for denibbing, and for removing runs in sort of curved parts, like curved panels and sort of semi-straight places like this one here. So yeah, they're a pretty handy little block. They're cheap as, they're like $8 or something, and you can just wrap your piece of sandpaper around it. And I find because they're not fully hard, they're a bit more forgiving. When you get like a really hard, rigid block working on fresh clear coat, they can have a tendency to dig into some of the spots if you're not careful. So yeah, I really do like those stick-it blocks, and I was just working my way down through the grade. So as I said, I started off with 800, then have a look at it down the side, sort of get your eye in on, like, it's not going to be full gloss yet, but you get your eye in on the light, and you make sure that you've got rid of that run, which you can do. And then you keep blocking. If you find a little bit more, then you go 800, 1200, 2000, and what I'm doing here is 3000 to finish it off with before I do my polishing. Yeah, I actually went for a while without using those 3000 grits, and I just said to my boss a few months ago, I said, man, can we get some 3000s in, please? I just must have got him on the right day, and he's like, yeah, no worries. So, oh man, my life has changed having those 3000 grits back. I'm never going back. Like, I used to use 3000 grit, I think we first got it in like 2004, and I loved it back then. But then I worked here, and my boss like stopped getting it in because he found that they were going through too many. But to be fair on him, they used the Kovacs ones, and they were like, you used to go through so many of them. Like, he'd go through like 3 or 4 boxes a week. But now using the 3M 3000 grit, the Trizact ones, they really do last quite a long time. You get a lot of use out of those things. And on the other side of things, they've actually came down in price. I remember when they first came out, they were like $70 or $80 for a box, and I looked at the invoice on the box that I got recently, and they were only like $40. I'm like, wow, man, why weren't we using these forever, you know? I'm actually looking into getting one of those mini orbital sanders for use with the 3000 grits. So I'm going to get one of those in soon, so I might even do a review on it. We'll see how we go. But yeah, next stage was to just get the mini buff now. So all I'm doing here is just getting rid of the run, making sure I'm able to get it out. So this is by no means the finished product. I'm not showing you that this is how you should finish a polishing stage on a vehicle, because it's not, but this is just me proof of concept. Okay, we got the run out, now we can send the car next door, we don't have to go into the booth. So yeah, to finish a job like this off, you're always going to want to use a random orbital polisher, and you probably want to go over it with a big buff too. So on the topic of random orbital polishers, I'm actually going to be getting one in very soon too, so that's another thing that I'll definitely be reviewing. I'm really excited about that thing. I've actually been having heaps of fun doing detailing and buffing and all that kind of stuff on my own car on the weekends. I've been cleaning it up every single weekend, giving it a wash, making sure that the inside's all nice and clean. And I've got this little random orbital polisher, but it's got like an 8mm orbit on it, and it's really not much chop. So I'm getting one in with a 15mm orbit on it, and yeah, look, we'll definitely be doing a review on that, so be sure to subscribe if you're not already. But that's just about it for this video there, guys. Hope you learned something out of it. And yeah, I guess my biggest piece of advice is just be careful with the razor blades and the tungsten. It is quite easy to dig in with the edges and the corners. With the tungsten, as long as you keep it nice and flat, you're usually pretty right. So with that tungsten, you may have noticed at the start that you keep it sort of more flat to the panel, and you start lifting it up as you go further and further, because that's going to want to dig in the more you lift it up. But again, that's just one of those things that you're just going to have to learn. You're just going to have to get the knack of it, stuff things up, repaint panels, and then you'll learn what does and does not work. And just for the record, I did not get this run with my Pro Light. It was that bloody Iwata, those Iwata Supernovas. It hasn't seen any clear coat since. It's in my bad book. I'd like to say a big thanks to everyone for watching, and if you'd like to support the channel further, you're more than welcome to go over and check out some of the merchandise we've got. My personal favorite is those spray suits. So they're a good quality Colad branded spray suit with a Gunman logo on it. There's also hats, drink coolers, hoodies, and t-shirts, so be sure to go over and check out the link in the description if you are interested. All that aside, I'd just like to say a big thanks for watching, and that is enough to support the channel. But as I say, if you'd like to go the next step, then be sure to check out some of that merchandise. Thanks for watching, and until next time, get out there and paint some shit. Gunman out.